And this month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Super Infra Man, Allison Cook, and Eric Hervin. Thank you all so very much for your incredible support.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I have with me Chris Ernst.
Hello.
Super Infra Man.
Hi.
And Natalie.
Hey.
So we're going to do listener stories this week. And we'll see where all this goes. I think last time we did like maybe 4 or 5 of them, and that took the whole show. So
epic.
We will see what happens this time. All right. This one is called, entitled Vortex Road 2012. So you got to love the story right from the title.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's like a Roger Corman movie.
I'm already thinking of the the old Time Life book where it had the guy flying through the tunnel of clouds, Vortex.
Wasn't that for like the Bermuda Triangle?
Yeah, sure was.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I need to see this. What is it?
There was this illustration. There's a story about a guy who was flying over the Bermuda Triangle, and the clouds made this like tunnel.
Oh,
and he flew through the tunnel and got wherever he was going way faster than he ever should have been able to. And they had this illustration of like this little plane going into this tunnel of clouds.
Oh, I think I have seen that, right.
Yeah.
Not to derail things, but I want the Bermuda Triangle to come back.
I know, right?
Yeah.
There was a meme floating around a little while ago that said, when I was a kid, I really thought the Bermuda Triangle would have more to do with my life in the future.
No kidding.
I remember that one. That was pretty cute. Like quicksand, the Bermuda Triangle, and lava.
Yeah. All right. So this one's from Bill. I've been meaning to share this story with you for some time now, since the very reason I began listening to your fine because it was the first. Okay, let me try again. It's the very reason I began listening to your fine podcast in the first place. Every summer, my partner and I would spend a couple of months at a campground in Thompson, Ohio, for seasonal work at the Medieval Festival near Geneva. The entrance to the campground across the road from a service entrance to Thompson Ledges, and we walked. I feel like I'm just reading it wrong. The entrance to the campground is across the road from a service entrance to Thompson Ledges, and we walked our dogs there once or twice every day. The road made a loop around the wooded area at the bottom of some small cliffs. We have been there for 4 or 5 summers when Val says to me, "Hey, look at that road." There was a road that went off 90 degrees and then turned again to follow parallel to our usual road and then disappeared further into the woods. We took that road, and it climbed gradually until we were in the park at the top of the cliffs. We walked down the highway and into our campground. It wasn't a very long walk, and we were stone cold sober. The next day, we tried finding the same road with no success. We tried every day for a couple of weeks to answer the question, where did the road go? We saw a road running parallel to our usual road, but it was overgrown when what we had been calling the Vortex Road was fresh white gravel. Furthermore, where the road should have forked, there was only a rain ditch. We decided that the overgrown road was our Vortex Road, and we had just stepped out of time to when it was first laid down. After the Mandela Effect rolled in for the next few years, we theorized that Vortex Road was where we stepped out of one world and into another. Maybe our world was destroyed and we weren't done working out our karma. Maybe the collective consciousness re-manifested the world. Maybe something just wants us to suffer longer. Because if this is the afterlife, somebody really dropped the ball. Whatever the truth is, it's going to turn out to be weirder than any human could guess.
Well, that's awesome.
Isn't it?
Yeah. I'd be curious if they saw anything unique or something like that, or details about what was like seeing going down the road before it overgrow. It was overgrown. I'm like, how do I say that? It's very, very time slippy. I like the Magellan. Oh my gosh, the Mandela effect in there.
It's okay. Words are hard. I understand.
right. Mandala instead of Mandela too. You can tell I've had a long day. But that kind of stuff is crazy, and I always enjoy those stories. And I don't know if everybody has one event like that in their life, but I'm sure you guys have all had something similar where you're like, I know I was here yesterday, and I could go this way down this road or something like that, and you can never make sense of it.
Yeah, but
it just never puts together the right way.
So often, though, I just assume, I'm probably just remembering wrong.
Right.
Whereas in this case, this was two people who walked down the road. They didn't just see it,
Yeah.
They really actively engaged with it and everything. Man, that's very interesting. It would be fun to look at like a topographical map of the area and see if the road was marked on there from somewhere in history or something like that. That way.
That's always a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of narrow down like, well, what did you see? Was it something you could find on a map from 50 years ago or, those kinds of things. So you at least have an idea of like, was it a time slip? Or if you couldn't find a record of it, then, that might be something a little different where you've slipped into another reality or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the thing with accounts like that. I just have a million questions that come up. Like, I want to know all the details.
Yeah, I do too. The detail of the really white gravel. Did they say that was something that kind of stuck out to me that I thought was very interesting.
Yep, fresh white gravel.
Yeah,
weird.
Because most roads are not graveled white.
No, that's a very specific decorative thing. I mean, I don't know the area, but that seems to me like this sort of it's very specific. I like it. I mean, I'm trying to imagine it in my head, and it's got a very sort of like mythic feel. This white gravel road winding up to what they said, like a ledge,
to a park at the top of the cliffs.
To a park at the top of the cliffs. Yeah, oh, that's great.
I might have missed it. Did they say the location?
Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah, it's they would spend a couple of months at a campground in Thompson, Ohio, for seasonal work at the medieval festival near Geneva.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know there was a Geneva, Ohio, but all right.
Yeah.
Of course there is.
Be interesting to find out if the park is like a kid's park with equipment and things like that, or is it more just like a park where it's open land and those type of things? And Chris, talking about the road like that also makes me think of a Fae experience too, or, the people going in a cave and coming out in another land or something like that.
Sure. It's similar to, not similar, but this kind of indecipherable or uncategorizable weirdness is always something that I'm like most excited by, where there's something that's not, it doesn't fall into any of these like buckets. I always like things like that.
So it's Thompson Ledges Township Park. And I'm clicking on things and nothing is happening. It's closed, incidentally. At this hour, I guess.
Oh, I was gonna say.
Let's go with about. Yeah, none of the links. Oh, wait, about's doing something. It's good for kids. Thanks. That's literally all it says.
It's for the kids.
Man,
Okay.
the pictures of it look really good. There's a lot of crags and mountainy boulders and things like that. Which makes sense since there was a ledge there.
Does it look like the kind of place that would have a freshly made path of white gravel?
Not these pictures.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's for fancy pants places. That seems really out of place for just
Right?
a random park.
Totally.
It is a nice looking park. Yeah, lots of ravines and stuff like that. Huh.
Oh.
All right then. The power of the internet.
Yes. Well, wilderness like this too. I've got a good friend of mine that is he's not skeptical about anything. He's very grounded and doesn't consider a lot, but you'll get him talking about the forest and things like that. Though, and he goes, we don't know everything that's out there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I always appreciate that. He's like, most stuff doesn't bother him. Open woods, open forest, old parks, and things like that. He still gets like a little, I don't know, man.
I mean, the only other thing that I can think of for, Ohio is that's Mound Town there, so there's all sorts of, in terms of the earth itself and like the land, it's got a history of anomalies, or at least interest, mystic interest.
I've had so many dreams over the years of places that don't actually exist in real life. It's not quite the same as encountering it in real life, but like it's repeated dreams of the same places that don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And and they always have this feel to them that I absolutely love. Like there's recurring dreams of a waterfall that I never get a chance to go see. And every once in a while I'm with someone in the dream and it's like, let's go to this waterfall. And then I realize this waterfall doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, me too. I have these very specific, like, especially houses and buildings that sometimes I can be like, sometimes I can tell like they're amalgamations of different houses or different places that I've had in my past, but some of them are completely new and they really stick with me. And one thing that I had tried to do, which obviously is just like another form of dream journaling, but I would, do this practice of trying to draw. Like you try to create some type of artwork. It's completely ripping it off from a practice that I heard of a fellow from New Zealand that was, one of the First Nations people there who, had this practice of that with dreams. But being an artist, it's helped me with these very specific like locations and geographies in my dreams, the ones that are repeating and trying to like, I guess, figure out what they are, have some sort of record of them. But the whole thing about drawing something, I guess in the traditional practice, it is, you draw on the ground, like, when you wake up. And that in some way is, I guess I'm probably mistranslating the actual, impetus behind it, but it's something about like showing the dream that you're taking it with you or that you recognize it, in some way interacts with dream as, an entity and will create a more powerful connection for you and that place in the dream world. So
makes sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Tracks with my experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, you draw a lot of your stuff, Natalie.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Great.
All right. Next one. Let's go with the fog story. This comes from Nick. My story takes place on the first full day I moved into a college town in Northern California to attend the university there for my freshman year. 19 years of age, so definitely a transition phase. I rode my bike to my older brother's house that he was renting out with other students. I was off at the campus dorm. On my bike ride back to the dorms from his place, I came across the railroad tracks and beheld a fog bank so thick that I couldn't see through it. This is pretty much a weather impossibility if you know the weather of Sacramento Valley in August. Sunny every day with temperatures in the 90s or above and low humidity. I got a very uncomfortable feeling as I looked upon this weird fog phenomena. So much so that I turned the bike around across the railroad track in another part of town. I simply was not willing to ride my bike into that fog. No further events transpired that day that I can recall. Can't recall if I had a missing time situation or not. Probably not, but still very strange.
I love it. I mean, the fog is, I think I had posted this up on the Where Did the Road Go Slack, but one of my favorite, like, stories that's you can probably never corroborate is this one that I think I found it on like a UFO site from Canada. And maybe this is a famous story that people know about and, can track back and tell me, disprove it. But it's essentially this, I think it was from around the 2000s, beginning of the 2000s that it came out. But it happened in Canada. And I guess it was this story this guy was telling that his brother told him about something that happened in the 60s, where essentially they were these loggers and they ended up in this, very remote part of Vancouver, and they were doing this scouting and they found essentially this like weird anomaly that was in this valley, there was a fog bank that was like, it was a shape. It was like a square, and it was sitting in this valley. And there are these other anomalies that were around, these like weird rocks that look like fish scales, they said they found. And there was this this dead tree that looked out of place there. And they also found this weird, like, it looked like this water that was being sort of like cordoned off into these lakes, but with this grass that was somehow keeping it like suspended and not spilling out. Anyway, they found these, but the strangest anomaly was this fog bank that when the guy like approached it, allegedly, he saw this field inside, and there were these two guys that looked like crazy old wizards, like they were dressed like, you know, old monks or something. I can't remember. And like he stepped back out of the fog and then stepped back in again, and they had like changed position, and they were like in these weird sort of like yoga positions. Very strange story. I think if you go on to, if I remember correctly, it was UFOBC.ca, which is like a Canadian, you know, UFO site, is where I had originally found it. I don't remember where it came from. I think it was from their MUFON or something. But anyway, it makes me think of the fog bank there.
Yeah.
I shared this with Saxon recently too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was so glad you brought that up, because as soon as they said fog, I was like, oh, this is like Chris's account that he shared. Where was I was calling those like Big Lebowski wizards or something like that, because they had long beards and robes. Right. Yeah. And they were,
exactly.
They were quite tall, if I remember, and they were floating in the air.
Yep.
6 foot plus. They weren't standing on the ground. They were in the sky. And were things very calm when he went to the fog bank too, right?
It seemed to him like another, I mean, it was like another world. It was he has a different skyscape in there and everything. Yeah. Like a vortex.
Well, Jenny Randalls wrote a book called Time Storms, and it partially, that's one of the things it talks about, these people who go into these weird fog banks and end up having very strange experiences. Sometimes UFO-like, and sometimes just with like missing time. I think she was focusing on the missing time Oz factor thing.
Right.
Right. And saying that whatever these things are, they're almost like time storms that are creating a fog, because people will go in and they'll come out the other end like hours later with only a few minutes feeling like they've passed.
Yeah. Time storm. I like that. That's interesting.
Not to bring this back around to the Fae folk, but that's very Celtic. Like from all my reading on my experiences recently, there's the Gwynab Neath and him being the son of mist, and the Tulwitheg coming out of the mist and being the people of the mist, and you know, a lot of stories about people traveling into the fog and having missing time and that kind of thing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I
mean, that must have come from somewhere. Like you know, I can see it in like popular culture and horror films, and it was there. It's been there since, you know, I feel like in media, or at least in tales, that would make a lot of sense if it has this origin in She, legend.
Yeah, and it makes sense, you know, for the Isles, you know, in UK. I'm assuming it's a little bit stranger when it's in Sacramento when it should be in the 90s.
Right.
But, you know, the same, and that makes it even stranger. But, you know, it seems like, you know, did it start with the tales that were woven around a natural phenomenon that is, you know, typically very discombobulating, or, you know, I don't know.
And fog's just disorienting anyway. Because it makes everything look creepy and weird.
Yeah, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think I've told my story to you guys before about, I grew up on a farm, and there was a pasture behind the house that would have fog settle in the middle of it because there was a little creek and things. Anyway, there was an emu out there one morning, and it was not our emu. It was probably came from somebody else's emu farm, and they let their emus out or something. I don't know. But the first time we saw this thing was this silhouette of the emu walking through the fog. Oh, it was incredible. I mean, it looked like there was a velociraptor, walking through our backyard.
Nice.
It's one of those things that always makes me think that you can hoax anomalous experiences, in a way that would still make your brain open to more things, because it felt completely anomalous watching that silhouette. Mm-hmm. And then even after we saw the emu, we're like, because it wasn't supposed to be there, it still felt like reality was fuzzy.
I mean, no matter what, an emu coming at you at random it's very odd.
It was.
How likely was it that the fog could be happening at the same time?
Oh, exactly. It made such a rich experience, looking back on it, that you couldn't have planned it better.
It's like some sort of Eleusinian mysteries. It's like the illusion is triggering some sort of Chapel Perilous trigger in you or something like that.
Right.
That's perfect.
What was great is he appeared for about 3 or 4 more years around the farm. I mean, he stayed a good 200 yards away from us, which was nice. So, and we would only see him once every couple of months. But every once in a while, there was a lot of forest on the farm too. You might see him creeping through the woods and his head bobbing. And, yeah. And again, you're just like, that is terrifying,
I don't know. I think it would be awesome if I had an emu who randomly visited my property.
At least it's not a cassowary.
Yeah, cassowary. That thing's like a little T-Rex. It was interesting. It was very cool at the same time, because we did have an emu out there that, if he was a little close to the house, you didn't go outside because you didn't want to agitate him. So I was like, we have to watch the emu.
Walking dinosaurs, man.
Someone comes over to visit, you're just like, watch the emu. What?
What? Yeah.
Is that like a llama?
Watch for the large stray theropod.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Next story. No, not that one. Oh, this one. This one's good. Well, they're all good, but this one stood out to me because he says, this is from Matt, and he says, I just finished listening to your April 10th podcast in which you briefly talk about nonverbal communication and voices in your head, and I wanted to share my own experience. When I was about 17 or 18, I had a friend that had taught me some meditation exercises, and we used them to look outside of our physical bodies, but I wouldn't go as far as to say it was astral projection. One night, I had used the meditation and went to look for my friend with my mind. It didn't take me long to find him. We had a very short conversation, and then he was gone. His voice seemed normal and very similar to an additional internal monologue in my head. I didn't think much about it until a week later when I saw him again, and he told me about the conversation, word for word. I haven't tried to do that again, not because it scared me, but I just haven't felt the need to. So when you have that kind of like backup, like you haven't told the person it, and they're like, oh, I feel like I had this conversation. That's interesting. I like stuff where you have that sort of confirmation level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, I guess I'm at a point where I don't even have to say, yes, this happens, because obviously this happens as far as I'm concerned, just because so many people that I've met and, I think the interesting thing now is to think about sort of, how it works. And, if you feel comfortable and it's something that you want to explore, figuring out how to do that. I mean, I think obviously, as with anything like this, there's, you want to be careful of yourself and, stepping into some place where, you might not feel comfortable or something, feels wrong for you. But, I would encourage, if that sort of connection is something that felt, like it worked for them, or, it was, they got some sort of feeling of worth out of it. I think that's a great thing to explore. I don't know. Just they seem a little bit like blasé about it.
Yeah. I know. Back when Conspiracy from King Diamond came out, there's the end of one of the songs is the spirit saying, "I will send you a dream."
Yeah.
And I thought, can you do that? And so occasionally I would take someone I was dealing with off and on, someone I was friends with, and I would focus on them as I was falling asleep. And almost every single time the next day they'd be like, I had a dream about you yesterday.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
And it's like, so I can't control the content of the dream, But apparently I can at least control my presence. I haven't done it since then. Like, it was kind of like just experimental. And I was like, well, I can't really do anything with this. But cool that it worked.
So I would love to know, like, how close of friends these two people are and things like that, too. Like, if it's somebody they've known their entire life.
Right.
Because those relationship connections seem to increase the likelihood of that coming together. But yeah, that's one of those things that I would certainly try to explore more if that's something they're comfortable with. I would love to have an experience like that. That's pretty neat stuff.
All right. I'll try to send you a dream.
There we go.
I do have one to share that reminds me of that.
What's that?
It was fairly recent, but it was with Heather, and I wish she was here to talk about it with me because it was, well, I'm the instigator. I didn't necessarily try to pull her into it, and again, this could have been coincidental, but in the same morning, let's see if I can remember this without rereading it. Essentially, I entered a dream, and I think at some point I became lucid, and I don't remember the circumstances in the dream where Heather and I met up, but we were walking together, and she seemed to be in sort of like a zombie state, like she didn't really know what was going on, and I became lucid, and at that point I wanted to meet the entity that brought us together, so I go searching for him. There was a lot more to the dream than that, but at some point we are in a place together, and that's when I became lucid, and I said something like, "Oh my God, Heather, we're doing that Inception thing." And I just looked right at her, and she's just like, "What?" Like, not getting it at all. And I think at that point it was just like maybe 90 seconds to waking up. I met a different entity at the very end of the dream. And then I woke up, and I think I woke up and immediately started to type it to her. And then she woke up a while later, and I saw her typing for a while, and she sends me this whole dream she had with that entity in it, the entity that brought us together. That after a whole lot of other stuff, it was like I ended the dream there and sent her off to go find him, and they found each other. I didn't find him, but both of us had this, it was within like an hour, I think, of each other. And she didn't remember meeting me, but she was also really like a zombie in the dream. Like she was not lucid at all. So
Right.
who knows what she was actually experiencing. So it's offset, it's not the same kind of thing, but it was as if because I really wanted her to go talk to him. And then she actually did she walked through a mirror in her dream, and there he was. And they actually had a sort of conversation.
Oh, yes, the old walking through the mirror trick.
So not exactly the same thing, but it sort of reminds me of that, like me giving that intent to,
Yeah.
it wasn't really my intent to enter her dream. It was to get her to talk to him. And then that actually, I wanted to also talk to him, but I didn't get to, but she did. So within 1 or 2 hours of each other's dreams, we had that.
Yeah. And I would argue those are very similar, Natalie. I think that,
Yeah.
when you're in that dream state, it just makes that ability to connect that much stronger.
Yeah.
Those tools are a little easier to access there.
Yeah. And you can't, but I'm terrible at the control, obviously. Like I got it there and I did kind of what I wanted, but it was, not exactly what I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. So, go ahead.
It's right.
No, go ahead.
It's fine. Well, I was going to say, like when I get lucid too, I'll have a period of time where I'm very lucid, and then like dream logic starts creeping into my mind. So the decisions I make start being more dreamlike and less logical to what's going on. So I totally get the control thing though, because sometimes I'll be quite in charge, and then I'll be like, oh, what if this house were made out of bread?
Right.
Stuff that doesn't make any sense at all.
Wait, how does that not make sense?
If you toast
Perfect
it and have
sense.
butter, it's perfect.
Right. Edible houses. Completely changed the housing market.
I don't know if that would help things or hurt things, although with the price of wood, bread might be cheaper.
That's also true. All right. So this next one, actually, I grabbed from Quora because it was a really interesting story. Because someone had asked, as a hunter, have you ever seen something in the woods that you can't just can't explain. And someone said, my uncle was a huge hunter and fisherman. He hunted all over the U.S. and Canada for decades. Everything you could hunt for, Marv hunted it. He was one of those guys that walked really fast, and you practically had to run to keep up with him. He would go hunting, take a pack and his rifle, and walk off into the woods, stay gone for 4 or 5 days, and come back with a cut-up deer all packed in his back. After 6 years in the military, I got out and came home. I started making the rounds, visiting friends and family. When I got together with him, he said we should go hunting. My dad had passed away a month before I went in. He used to hunt with him from time to time, so we made plans to go hunting, myself, Marv, and my cousin Bill. When deer season came around, we went to the national forest, parked, and got our gear. We trekked in for hours until he found a spot he liked for a camp. We set up everything and had a look around. We were on the top of a ridge that dropped off on one side by a river a good 75 feet down. He just told us, you guys hunt around here tomorrow. I'll be gone when you get up. At 5 a.m. we were up and he was gone, so we wandered around, checking things out, saw a few doe, found a few tracks here and there. We set up a natural blind and waited but didn't see much, then headed back late in the afternoon. Same thing the next day, but that night, after we ate, Bill and I were sitting around. There's no comma, so it actually says, but that next night after we ate Bill, and
That's how I heard it.
and Bill and I were sitting around the fire, Marv hit the bed. Bill walked over to the edge of the ridge and was looking at the sky, and he called me over, pointing down by the river, and he said, look, what the hell is that? I stood there looking with him, and there was a strange greenish blue light zipping around real fast down by the water about a half a mile away. We watched it for several minutes, then it shot up in the air and it was gone. We sat around for a while talking about it, then hit the sack. The next night, it appeared again. This time, Bill got his dad up, and he watched it too. The next morning, we all set out to hike to that spot. We searched a large area next to the river and found nothing but a few animal tracks. That night, nothing happened, and we never saw that again. 2 days later, Marv got a big buck, and we packed up and headed out. Don't know what we saw, and I've never seen anything like that again. Anyone still there?
I guess again, questions come to mind, and I want to know how big it was.
There's no detail about how big it was. But, I mean, a national park, weird lights, I mean, that's par for the course, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, just being in the park and seeing something like that, I would almost wonder, and I'm not saying that had an abduction experience that they don't remember, but I guess I'm wondering if that's possible that they could have, especially with it recurring like that. Of course, that's also drawing a lot into what the light could be too. There's a lot of assumptions there.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many, and that's one of those things, like depending on what you're interested in. So a ufologist might say, well, that was a UFO. Someone into Fae folk will say, oh, that was that was Fae.
Right. I think the size is interesting too, because sometimes the size dictates slightly different behavior, and that I feel like I've known people that have talked to me about smaller lights that flit in a way that's a little bit more, not like a firefly, but definitely not a firefly, but something that's smaller. And then, there's stories that I've definitely heard from people where it's like a large pulsing light that is a lot, maybe further away, or, it has more, a different feel to it. So, yeah. And I mean, again, my general theory of everything is that, the supernatural ecosystem is probably just as diverse as our, material one. So I could be many different things.
That's exactly what I was thinking about with the size. It does seem to determine behavior. And that blue-green color is pretty common too, it seems like.
Yeah.
The Josh on last week's show, which you guys haven't heard yet, made a comment about how, because we've talked for years about how lights seem to be at the core of everything. And if I'm remembering right, he suggested that maybe this has something to do with our pineal gland, and that the light sets that off, which releases some level of DMT that helps us interact with this stuff.
I have to agree with that.
Yeah, that was a really brilliant observation on his part. I had not thought about it that way.
Oh, so that it interacts and causes something to happen in us that allow us to interface in a more productive way.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I have a pineal tumor that I've had since early childhood, and I've always had a unusual reactions to light. It's not seizures, it's not epilepsy, and it always feels as though, and I've tried to describe this to people most of my life, and very few people understand, certain spectrums of light will give me certain kinds of psychedelic experiences almost.
Yeah.
Like if I'm wandering, a road at night and just staring at I'm like a moth or something. I just stare at the streetlights, and because it gives me such a powerful experience, like a powerful feeling. And so lighting to me is very important. I will set up lighting just to have those experiences to kind of, bring about creative experiences or creative inspiration for art and that kind of thing. And to me, it's more powerful than even psychedelics have been if I get it just right.
Sure.
And so, for a normal person without a tumor, I mean, you see that strange light and maybe it triggers something in the pineal gland that then releases more DMT or lets, or does something else to us that allows that interface. And that would explain why lights are so common as the core experience to these things, because they're the forerunner.
That's a great thought. I like that a lot. And the eyes have such an interesting way they're wired into the brain and stuff like that too. So, I can absolutely see that.
Yeah, because spectrum plays a big role. So, if this was a blue-green one, and like I was saying, spectrum will do certain things to me. It makes a lot of sense. Like that's a really powerful communication tool if it's wielded just right. But I would think that there would be something else involved that isn't just the light. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, something that just occurred to me is, I believe that, and I am not an astronomer, one of the many things that I am not knowledgeable about, but I believe that there is some difference. Like you can tell, like one of the ways that we tell that, Mars has a certain kind of mineral composition has to do with the glow. Like, I believe that's true, right? I wonder if there's ever been any sort of, anybody that's looked into or thought about, and I only think about that too, sort of in the sense of, elements, not that I'm reducing things to the sort of, faux elemental, for division thing, but this idea of sort of base elements, even the way that you hear of them existing in mythology, or, from cold iron and the she to, different metals in Norse mythology or Greek mythology. But I wonder, I'd be curious when you mention the colors there, Natalie, and how that really dictates, can dictate certain things. I wonder.
Do you mean like in the way that, and Seriah and I were just talking about this the other night in terms of like what color meteorites burn?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So this next one I've had for a little bit, and it's kind of a weird one. So let's see where we can go with this. This comes from Jonathan. He says it's a dream question. And he says, is there an esoteric concept for the 8 sitting gods? And when I mean sitting, I don't just mean the sitting position, but also those currently in power or influence. I had a dream where the context for this idea was not a benevolent one, although it might be something more akin to ambivalence rather than straight up evil. Its symbol was an arrangement of 8 C shapes in a circular pattern, or it could be 8 O's with a section missing in its body roughly in the upper right corner. Each C is attached to one another. There was a flame-like glyph above the top C in the arrangement. The numerological system I use indicates C equals 3 and O equals 6, and he has some calculations here. I'm aware of the 4 cardinal and 4 secondary intercardinal directions. The symbol was depicted in black on a stark white sheet of paper and was precise, like printed on the sheet instead of hand-drawn. The story associated with this was a dream I had about being in a large farmhouse on a dreary day. I was with a number of other people who I was supposed to know but were unfamiliar to me in real life. We were all dealing with a sense of foreboding and doom. Once this symbol/concept was revealed, there was also the revelation about something called the Wind and the Wind 2. These winds were also groups of gods, with the Wind 2 being the most benevolent. The imagery associated with the wind was very materialist, wealthy people's cars such as Mercedes, and black in color. The night in question, 6/22/20 and 6/23/20, we had a strong thunderstorm. When I awoke, the mirror hanging in my roommate's mantle had jumped off the wall and destroyed a clock he had. So a lot of energy had built up during the night, and I think this was the catalyst for the mirror breaking sometime in the early morning. Again, symbolically, the destruction of something revelatory or something that reflects information is not lost on me, as the clock that reveals illuminates time. My impression is that the dream I stumbled across something that would rather remain hidden at this time. Quick background leading up to this, since I hear guests ask this a lot. I had just moved into a new roommate situation after being in a bad situation where drinking was rampant. I'm sensitive to the supernatural, and the dulling of the environment where I was due to alcohol. The dulling of the environment where I was due to alcohol was palpable. My current roommate is a sensitive soul, but doesn't subscribe to anything supernatural. He owns a sweet but assertive male Shih Tzu. Anyone want to run with that one?
Does it just end at the Shih Tzu?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too.
Yeah. It's like, oh, cool dog. Okay.
Wonderful. So the 8 sitting gods, is that something that I am not familiar with that as a phrase?
No, neither am I. I can't remember if I looked it up or not. Let's see. And this might just be from his dream. It's kind of what it sounds like to me.
Sure. Well, first thing makes me think of is the 9, but wrong number.
Right, yeah.
Right. It's interesting the people that he was supposed to know in the dream, and if they were there both nights, you hear different things like that. People, if you were on the ufology side, there might be the people that you see in an abduction experience or something like that, that you recognize them again when you're there with them, but otherwise you wouldn't. And it also makes me think very fayish or something like that as well. I've heard of people with ayahuasca experiences feeling like they have entire families when they're in the hallucinatory part of that, or whatever we want to call that part of the experience.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, they would have I forget their term for maybe like an astral family or something like that. That's completely separate from their, waking family, I guess, if you want to call it that.
So the only thing that comes up when I type in 8 sitting gods is the 8 Hindu gods and goddesses yoga enthusiasts should know about.
Yeah, that's what I got too.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds like a profound dream.
It does.
Along with some synchronistic stuff happening, but I don't totally know what to make of it.
I don't. I mean, the names, like dreams, again, and this is simply my opinion, reflect in many ways the trickster motif, in that you get this mix of things. And we probably all can agree on that to some extent. But in particular, the wave and the wave 2, something about that seems to me, it has that, like, or at least for me, like the mouthfeel of the weird dream logic that is just part of dream logic. But then some other things, like maybe the symbol, something specific like that, I mean, obviously they can come from anywhere, but that interests me as being something maybe to pick apart. And it's hard for that, maybe just because I can't quite get my mind around what the symbol looked like.
Right.
Yeah, I'd really like to see it.
Yeah, he did. Right. It said it was 8 C shapes in a circular pattern. Or it could be 8 O's with a section missing in its body roughly in the upper right-hand corner. Each C is attached to one another, and there was a flame-like glyph above the top C in the arrangement.
I would love to see a drawing of that. That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I do have a difficult time trying to put that together in my brain, but I really...
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Natalie. No, please go ahead.
It's difficult to tackle because prior to hearing Heather's experience on the Strange Familiars and having the whole thing that came of that, asking the entity's name and getting a Welsh deity's name. Prior to that, I have had no stable or real interest in like polytheism or deities or gods or things like that, and that just sort of shook my worldview. And trying to come at that since then, I've had other dreams and things like that I really don't share because I don't know what to make of them. My whole thing has always been kind of archetypal, like it's a goddess, just sort of like a cultural costume for an archetype, an agreed upon creation, that kind of thing. But at the same time, I can't really deny that there's been this kind of shared experience. So I would wonder what this person's idea of these gods were. Like, if was it male or female?
Jonathan. So I'm assuming male.
Yeah, if he's had any like interactions with them, if there's any like idea of what the origins, culture,
Right,
the culture,
right.
because that's kind of missing. I would say just the only way to find out is to engage.
It sounds like these were like two different dreams, and that was it. I mean, if this happened to me, I'd be taking it with a very personal sort of
Right.
interpretation. I
Yeah.
wouldn't think it's reflecting
Yeah.
something. I mean, there might be some esoteric truth there to how things work behind the scenes, but it would be very hard to pull apart. So I think you'd be looking at something that was just very, very personal and esoteric in a sense.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I find it interesting that I've been having a lot of synchronicities around 8 as it pertains to these esoteric things, though. So that was kind of interesting to hear because I don't really hear 8 as being a recurring number. It's always 3 or 9.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
I do like,
Huh?
real quick, I do like what you said, Natalie, about, kind of cultural trappings and archetypes, because, I think things are floating around out there. Sometimes I call them big ideas or whatever. And they make themselves look differently. And that kind of goes back to the trickster phenomenon too,
Yeah.
our aspect. But, it may have been that those ideas are like, well, we're going to make ourselves look like this for you. And it's up to you to figure out what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it does seem like the trickster's always the operator or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Always the puppet master.
All right, so this one's a little longer. This is from Chris, and he just titled it My Paranormal Experience. I've always been interested in the paranormal, and I find the subject extremely fascinating. It's a subject I approach with a huge amount of respect, but I haven't personally had much experience in my life, just a couple possible UFO sightings that were hard to explain. Even though they were memorable experiences, they were way off in the distance, so it was nothing to write home about. But I did have one experience which was quite hard to forget. It was actually a series of events that took place when we used to live in Germany. I was young when it happened, but I could still see the visuals like it was yesterday. In the mid-1970s, I was around 5 years old. My family and I lived on the U.S. Army base in Wildflecken, Germany. As a little bit of added history, this base was used during World War II by the German Army. During that time, they kept Polish and Russian prisoners there to work in the town and farms to replace the Germans who were drafted away to war, calling it the Displaced Persons Camp. From what I gathered, the U.S. took the base over as they advanced through during the war. They officially turned it into a U.S. Army base in 1951, Camp Wildflecken. It's just an amusing name, honestly. Our home on the base was an apartment building that had a few units per building with a spiral staircase hallway connecting the top and bottom floors. While I was there, I remember having the usual family experiences, fond memories of the snow, the neighbor's dog, and all the camping trips we took. However, I also remember the most vivid dreams that I can recall to this day. These dreams did not fall in the category of fond memories. In truth, they frightened me to my core. In the house, we had one of those hung rugs on the wall. I remember Jesus' fingers being eerily thin and long, and the border was lined with a row of ivy or grape leaves. I'm sorry. The house had one of those. I missed an entire line. The house had one of those vintage Sacred Heart tapestry rugs.
That's where it came from.
Okay.
Of Jesus
Okay.
hanging on the wall, because that's what you did in the 70s. Yeah, for some reason my eyes just, okay. You hung rugs on the wall. I remember Jesus's fingers being eerily thin and long, and the border was lined with a row of ivy or grape leaves. To be honest, that thing just always gave me the creeps. It hung just above the couch in the living room. One evening, I fell asleep on the couch, and in my dream, I woke up horrified by what I saw. For some reason, my eyes keep skipping a line. I fell to the floor and scooted back as far as I could at the sight of these leaves individually marching off the picture, single file, down onto the couch and then onto the floor and into the hallway. I could hear them marching as I remember a menacing yet magical feeling, as if they knew I was there. It scared the hell out of me, and after that, all I can remember is running past them as I bolted into my parents' room. One of the other dreams I had, I remember being frozen with fear as my bedroom wall right next to my bed was covered with slithering, hissing black snakes. And not the innocent little garter snakes either. These were big, black, scaly, serpenty snakes. I remember them creepily moving upwards to the left and it looked like they were in a hurry. Again, it felt like they were aware of my presence, but they never crawled off the wall or onto me. However, I remember feeling helpless because I tried to call out to my parents, but my voice wouldn't work at all. I think that was the most frightening part. Eventually, I was able to yell out for them, and my dad came in to try and make them disappear, but that's all I remember. Another dream I had was also in my bedroom, but there were no snakes this time. It was late at night, and after everyone had gone to bed, all the lights were out, and I remember a voice calling my name while I was sleeping. I woke up not knowing where the voice was coming from, so I turned around and sat up at the foot of my bed to see if it was coming from a little rubber toy I had often played with. That was weird enough in its own right, but stranger still, it was hanging on the cross I had above my headboard. It was one of those bendy toys that had the wire inside so you could bend the arms and legs. It wasn't a menacing toy by any means, but it was, in fact, talking to me. It almost seemed to glow while doing so. I don't really remember what it said, but I remember hearing my name, and I don't recall being afraid of the voice at the time. It seemed like it was giving me some kind of advice or instructions, but again, I can't recall a single word of it. The last dream I had during this time was of me flying down a spiral staircase into the neighbor's apartment as I was floating along with my arms spread out like a bird. I remember seeing daylight in the staircase while I was there. For some reason, this sticks out to me. This dream was very lucid as well, and I knew I was dreaming and could control my flight. I remember seeing my neighbors in their house, and I remember them noticing me. Then again, it might not have been the neighbors that noticed me. It might have been another presence there with them. I had that particular experience only a few more times in my childhood, but it went away when I got older. It reminded me of out-of-body experience the kid had in the movie Insidious. It was always something in my life that I've never had answers to. I couldn't understand why I remembered those dreams so vividly. What did they mean? Why did I remember those dreams more vividly than all the other dreams I've had in my life? It was years later I finally had a revelation as to why they were so memorable. When I was around 20 years old, I mentioned them to my mother when I was visiting her in the hopes that she could shed some light on them. She patiently heard everything I had to say and then replied, Chris, those were not dreams. She then explained to me that for 3 days I had terrible hallucinations that not only scared me, but scared the hell out of them as well. My dad used a spray bottle on the wall to take care of my imaginary snakes. It was so bad they eventually took me to the doctor to look for answers. The doctors were convinced I had gotten into some cleaning supplies under the kitchen sink, but when they ran tests, nothing came up. They ended up diagnosing me with delirium tremens, which is something that severe alcoholics experience during detox. I can say with certainty, at 5 years old, I was not an alcoholic. After hearing all this from my mother, it definitely sent a cold chill down my spine and definitely answered why it was so memorable. However, the question of what it all meant and why all this happened to me has yet to be answered. It's something I have never forgotten.
Oh. Well, I mean, the first thing that really sticks out to me is that all of those, to some degree, had some symbolic association with, Chris with Christianity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what this person's what their feelings are about Christianity or the Christian faith or Christian mysticism. But as has been discussed many times on this show, if Red Pill were here, he would probably first thing he'd say is what Fatima, like here's this a supernatural phenomena or uncanny phenomena or at the beginning didn't they say they saw a couple of UFOs far away
He
at one point or something?
in his life, and I don't think when he was this young.
In
I
his
think,
life,
yeah.
but still, just the fact that in this entire story that he's putting all of these things together. I mean, I think that there's there is some intertwining there. Like if you had told this story 100 years ago, this would have been completely about religion and faith. And I'm not saying that it is, but it's it's something to examine because I think that the urges or where these come from, kind of inside us, these connections to some of these phenomena, and it's not to say that there aren't nuts and bolts things that happen out there that are pretty weird too, but I think a lot of this supernatural phenomena, I am sort of in the camp of like a Jeffrey Kripal, that I think that there is they're inherently linked.
So the only one that doesn't have that religious overtone was the last dream where he was flying down the staircase to his neighbor's apartment.
I think it's still good with the spiral staircase, though. That seems to be a fairly strong motif.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the sunlight.
I didn't think of. Yes, you're right. I totally didn't think about that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have, excuse me, I have dreams about snakes when I have a lot of anxiety. And of course they're not, well, they are aware of me, but it's more like an Indiana Jones thing where the snakes are all over the floor of my house or something like that,
Of course.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's terrible. I wish it was lava, so I had a better reason to, avoid the floor.
Or the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, the Bermuda Triangle, exactly. That would make me much happier.
I wish the Bermuda Triangle was all over my floor.
But the snake thing. So all of this is kind of happening in that same apartment or that same area, and I would really be curious if other people were having experiences there. So we lived in a little house until I was about 6 years old. That's where we saw shadow people. My siblings all had experiences in there. My mom did. My dad never did. But it was enough that one night my mom got us up and we went and stayed at my aunt's house because of the weird things that were going on in that place. And there's a familiarity with some of his experiences that remind me of being in that house. And I wonder if it's something to do with the location. Something that's not a kind presence there.
Right. Well, that's the other. I mean, this wasn't a concentration camp, but this was a forced labor camp, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
there you go.
That's another, right. There you go. I also believe in, what do we call it? The restless dead spirits, in that sense too, particularly if it was trauma and there was, trauma there, and maybe it's just a different impression, maybe it's a psychic impression, but that certainly could play a factor in there too.
True.
I could absolutely see that. And, if you're in a forced labor camp, I wonder if there's a anger against your religion. Mm-hmm. And so you get some of that sort of like manipulation of the Christian iconography to being a corrupted, I guess would be the way to put it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from there. Yeah.
How could God let this happen to us?
Right.
Exactly.
And he said he was 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me, when I was 5, I had a lot of dreams that were very similar, not similar in terms of the symbolism, but just the the power. I really like the way that was written, though, where the reveal at the end was that it was, hallucinations.
Yeah.
But still, it makes me think at that age, whether it's an illness or something that might, it could have been some sort of virus that just happened to manifest that way as the hallucinations. But being 5, I feel like that's a really potent time in childhood, like your brain is kind of putting itself back together, or that kind of thing, or putting itself together. You're getting out of toddlerhood, so you're really like, people concentrate at 7 years old, but for me it was definitely 5 when I started to get really powerful dreams like that. It wasn't hallucinations, but really, if I tell them aloud, it's not even that symbolic. It's something that was just so, like, the imagery was so strange. It didn't really make a lot of sense, but it had that impact on me, like that deep, he used the word tremens, like that's the delirium tremens, but, that kind of just sort of numinous terror that I would experience in those dreams. That was especially around the age of 5 and 6 for me. So if I'd been hallucinating, who knows? And if I'd been in a situation like that where there was just saturated with religious iconography, I could see that. Yeah, it makes sense.
And it must have been quite a shock to him to find out that those weren't dreams that he was remembering.
Yeah, that would be terrifying.
Right.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, all right, let's see. We got time for at least one or two more here. Let's go with one of the shorter ones. Okay, this one's titled "That Time the Dead Tried to Talk to Me." From Jordan, he says, about 10 years ago, I assume it's a he. Jordan, I guess, could go either way. About 10 years ago, I had a dream where I was 6 or 7 years old. I was in a park, and a little boy comes running up to me, yelling at me as loud as he can, but I couldn't hear him. After several minutes of this kid trying to communicate with me, there was a large explosion, and I woke up. My mother and I were staying with her brother, my uncle, and his wife. After waking up, I went to tell my mom about this strange dream I had. As I'm telling her about it, my aunt comes walking out crying and begins to tell me the exact same story I had just told, but that she could hear what the child was saying. Tell my family they have to let me go. I'll always be there at their side. We later found out that one of my mother's friends had a son that died in a freak accident while playing with a friend. Both the kid's father and older sister blamed themselves for his death because neither of them checked on him soon enough to prevent the accident, and they both have two tattoos with his name and the years of his life on their side.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sounds like that's exactly what there was. And again, here you have two people having basically the same dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so much trauma around that too. I mean, that's gotta just be, so much psychic pain and emotion overflowing.
Okay, so this one. Okay, I think we have time for this one. All right. So this one came from YouTube, and I'm trying to remember whose show this was in response to. Because I didn't mark that down. It came from Centurion Eagle on YouTube, and they responded with, "This was a great one, but I don't remember which show it is." They said, "The arm grabbing this made me trip out because I live in Canada and Toronto, and we have this station called YTV, and I remember Beck came on to do an interview with the hosts of this TV segment called The Zone. This was years ago. I was 10 or 11, so about 2000 or 2001. I remember Beck had like a fake arm or something, or he had his arm sleeve rolled up like most people do when they lose a limb, and the host grabbed it, and Beck was like, 'Don't touch that,' all serious like. I wish I had high strangeness." So maybe this was your episode, Natalie.
It was, yeah. I remember this comment.
"I wish I had high strangeness experiences like the one in this episode. I used to get sleep paralysis a lot, and I'd explore a whole lot with it in astral projection, but that's it. The closest high strangeness thing or a weird ghostly thing I can think of was when I was about 16. I was sleeping over at a friend's house after a party, and I was in a deep, drunken sleep, yet I felt something wake me up out of it. It was like a cold hand on my shoulder. I wasn't wearing a shirt in real life, and it was jostling me a bit in my dream, and I knew in that moment someone was kind of pushing on my shoulder. So when I woke up and looked, there was this young blonde boy who kind of looked like the street kid in the movie Shanghai Nights with Jackie Chan, Haha, nobody's even going to get that reference. I don't know why I bothered.
I get it.
That was Charlie Chaplin in that movie
Yeah.
as a child.
But it looks like that kid exactly, except a blonde version. Anyway, it freaked me out, so I recoiled and went like, whoa. And when I did that, he also kind of freaked out and recoiled as well. He looked scared, and so I freaked out and threw the blanket over my head and yelled to wake up my friend who was sleeping a few feet away in his bed. I was sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag. Anyway, when I looked back, the kid was gone, but a day or two later, I noticed that I had this purple marker writing on my shoulder, but I couldn't make out what it said. It was like a full sentence, and at this point, I couldn't make out any of the words. It somehow took me like a day or two to notice it, and that's pretty weird in itself. I should have noticed the next morning when I went home and showered. Anyway, a year or two later, I was at the same friend's house, and I saw a purple Sharpie there and a cup of pens, and I yelled at my buddy, saying he should have told me by now that it was him who had written on me, and he said he didn't. And I pointed out the purple marker, and he swore he didn't do that, and said that I probably did it when I was drunk. I might have written something on my arm so I wouldn't forget, and that's ridiculous. I'm right-handed, and it was on my right shoulder, plus I wouldn't have done it anyways. It was really weird, and I've asked my friend for years later, and he still says he didn't do it. I couldn't have been him anyway. And when I saw the boy, I could see my friend sleeping, so it would have been impossible. I almost feel like I saw the writing when it was fresh and then I forgot about it, like a Men in Black memory eraser thing was used on me. Another time I randomly remembered cutting through this school at 2 to 3 in the morning and seeing this tall guy in a black cloak and hood, but I couldn't see his face. He was just standing in this cubby corner thing, and it was really weird because I don't remember it happening. I only remembered it like way after the fact, like months later, maybe even a year. That was another instance where it felt like something used a Men in Black pen on me. I'm almost glad that it happened that way because I would have freaked out, but fortunately it's like it never happened. There was just a memory of it happening, and in the memory I just kept walking and looking back, and that's all I remember.
Yeah, I love that comment so much. I particularly love that it starts with that Beck anecdote from something and then just launches into that.
I mean, yeah, I guess that would be really creepy to see a little kid, that's not supposed to be there waking you up.
Yeah, and why are they always
yeah.
blonde? Well, not always, but...
They're usually blonde, you're right. You're totally right.
Watch
And they
out
have
for the
like
blonde ones.
white eyes, glowing
Yes.
eyes.
Huh.
Children of the Corn kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's-
Village
yeah.
of the Damned.
Oh, I'm terrified of small towns and cornfields from that movie.
So what was written on the shoulder? Did he
He
say?
couldn't-
Did I miss that?
He couldn't make it out.
Oh, see, that's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a different
It was
language.
probably, yeah. It was probably just like, knowing how many times drunk dudes, like young dudes, have drawn on each other with
Yeah.
markers. I've probably been there. Yeah. It's,
Well, sober people draw on drunk people too.
yes, that's true. That's what I meant, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other way. Yeah. Right.
And he dismisses it being his friend because he could see his friend was asleep, but he's assuming that's when it happened.
Yeah.
His friend, let me try and talk again. If his friend drew on him, it might have happened earlier, and he, because he was drunk, only registered it later, and it kind of came to him in sort of a dream state.
Totally.
But if his friend insists he didn't do it, maybe he didn't do it. Maybe, this kid drew on his shoulder.
Yeah,
Right.
and even then, just the kid alone is just such a bizarre... Like, it has that kind of flannel man feeling where he's surprised, and,
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
it's got all the trappings of the phenomenon. But, what is he supposed to be? A ghost? There's no real...
Yeah. It just
Anchor
says it was
to
a
it.
kid,
Yeah.
And the kid was shocked that he was shocked.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I will say, the Shanghai Nights reference, it was set in the, 1800s? No, it was 1900s. But it was supposed to be Charlie Chaplin as a little boy.
Really?
Yeah, it was one of Jackie Chan's. Yeah, it was one of Jackie Chan's kind of tributes to his, homages to his influences because he loved Charlie Chaplin.
Weird,
so
yeah.
the young sidekick, they find out at the end, is named Charlie Chaplin, and it's supposed to be Charlie Chaplin. But he had on, very period style clothing and things like that too. So it makes me wonder if this child looked like someone from the turn of the century.
Yeah.
In terms of dress and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Huh.
Yeah.
Fair
Let me
enough.
see when Charlie Chaplin was born. 1899. So
Yeah.
right at the turn of the century.
Yeah. So this was like the ghost of some
The ghost
century.
of the actor kid that played Charlie Chaplin in Shanghai Nights.
But blonde.
But blonde.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, blonde.
All right. So I got one more short one here. And he says, this is a strange thing that happened recently. He sent me pictures, which obviously I can't present on audio. I pulled out a fork from my cutlery drawer and found that this had happened with one of them. The one on the right is what it's supposed to look like, which just looks like a normal, fork. The one on the left looks like it's been chewed or used to pry hold something open. I live alone. I don't have any pets that might have chewed it, so I do not have an explanation for this. I also don't have a dishwasher, so it wasn't mangled as some things might if they fell to the bottom. I am not given to having paranormal experiences occur in my life. At 61, I can count the truly inexplicable events in my life on the fingers of one hand. And yeah, the picture, this thing is mangled. It's just like, okay, if I picked that up out of my drawer, I'd be thoroughly puzzled.
Can you send it to me?
I can post it too with
Yeah.
the. I don't have it right here, but I can try and remember to post it with the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting.
And physical evidence like that is always fascinating.
But even so, it doesn't count for much, Yeah, because you got to believe the person, and I do.
Is it the same kind of fork as the other one? Like the same?
Yeah.
Style.
But you wouldn't even know.
Like the 4-tine kind of just typical fork.
So he only shows the handle because the handle is what's all destroyed.
Oh, the handle.
Yeah,
Okay.
the handle part of it. And it's absolutely destroyed. And it's like, I don't have any explanation for what could do that. Nor is that like a well-known, paranormal phenomena either.
Right.
Spoon.
The cutlery stuff always makes me think of like poltergeist kind of things, but to have just a one-off experience where it's just in the drawer and twisted.
Who would even do that? It says Dang Hain's coming in and trying to open their paint cans.
Yeah.
It looks like it was chewed up, is what it looks like.
Maybe he's doing some like, in his dreams, he's doing some like advanced Uri Geller spoon bending type stuff.
I am the master of spoon destruction.
Watch this. Woo.
That's what I really hope it is.
It's a real party trick where you have to go to
True.
sleep to actually do it. Just give it 24
right.
hours.
Well, so what? He's Edgar Cayce.
Yeah.
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 All right, let me
That's
give you
pretty
all.
interesting though.
Let me give you all the answers to your questions. Let me just nap.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
When I was like 8 years old, I saw the Unsolved Mysteries where they talked about him sleeping on his books. And I tried that for like a month.
Yeah.
Never worked, unfortunately.
And Casey's not one of those guys who seems to have been a fraud, as far as I can tell.
No.
There's some really weird stuff associated with him. Now, it's hard to tell what's going on with the Edgar Cayce Foundation sometimes, but that's a
Sure.
that's different from Edgar Cayce.
Sure.
And the fact that, like, it's interesting that he would come up with such weird cures. He'd tell people to, take a penny and do this or whatever, and it would work. And I almost wonder, like, was there some level of him convincing, because the people believed it, it was almost like a placebo effect,
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, a lot of that it seems to be at least.
Or was he mildly hypnotizing them when he was talking to them?
Could have been, from a magical side of things, it's like, is he writing a spell with that, that cure?
Right.
And when you utilize it, you're executing that spell, and it may only be good for that one time.
Yeah.
And I've heard these kinds of spells, these odd ones, that have to do with like pennies and, everything from like, powwow to, the research that I do into, Indian and Southeast Asian holy people. Like there's a lot of weird little spells, like, to get rid of snakes, you have to like burn an eggshell and, make a powder. These aren't coming from like, weird hucksters either. This is coming stuff from very strange fakirs and guys that, are in the middle of the woods and stuff like that. Or this one where they like put a frog in a pot and you can have this everlasting money jar. Weird stuff. I mean, no judgment. Weird in that it is uncanny.
Yeah.
Isn't so much of that just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, Natalie, go ahead.
Isn't so much of that just, using different objects and materials to focus that sort of placebo and that intent?
Sure, yeah. I definitely think so. And it's like, it's what you see, I guess, and I'm not, I don't have a really big knowledge base of hoodoo, but it's this, you're using what's at hand, and this flies in the face completely of some of the ceremonial magic folks, but that could be a whole different thing. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Not the material itself, but what it means to you or what it means to you culturally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
I'd just be curious what was going on in their life at the time, too.
Of course.
With the kind of the poltergeist aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like something that was just built up, and then the energy was just focused, and that's what happened.
On that poor fork.
On that poor fork. But, once it was out, it was done.
Well, that's why I was wondering if it looked like the same piece of cutlery set, because if not, then I had this idea of like an oopart that's trying to look like a fork, but doesn't quite get it right,
Oh, that creeps me out significantly.
I like that.
I'm okay with the doppelganger people, but for some reason the cutlery, don't copy that, please.
Oh, all right. Well, that's the perfect place to stop. And where can people find you, Chris?
Doppelgangercutlery.com. You can go to brightrectangle.com. Find everything I do.
All right, including the doppelganger cutlery.
I'm gonna have that's Natalie's. Yeah, or she doesn't want it. So okay, I'll take it. I'll do something with it. It's my next horror movie.
Ooh.
I endorse this.
Where did this fork come from? I've never seen it before.
Right.
Just 90 minutes of that.
And Super Infra Man is busy fighting crime. You can't find him.
You can't find me. I do hang on Instagram a little bit. That's about it.
And aren't you in the Discord as well?
Yeah, I'm on the Discord. I get in there occasionally and respond to people. So if you're on the Discord, happy to visit now and then on there. The one thing I like to punch is if you got the opportunity to be a Patreon for Seriah, you ought to do it, because this is a great show, and being able to support our interests if you're listening to the show is a good thing to do.
Thank you.
Doesn't have to be a lot of money. It could be a couple of dollars, and having access to the Patreon shows, by the way, is great. There's some awesome stuff on there, and it's definitely worth more than any of the Patreon donation levels.
Well, thank you.
Seconded.
And Natalie, don't you have a page for your art?
I have a very old website that was made in 2006, which you can always go to. I would have to spell it out. It's HOTHERYM.net, or you can just type in the anagram of that, which is Eorhythm or Loga Jorgen, and find my stuff.
Well, you like easy to spell things, don't you?
I do.
All right. Thank all of you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. Without you, this show simply wouldn't be possible. And I want to give an extra special shout out for those of you pledging $10 or more. Allison Cook, Super Infra Man, Eric Hervin, Tim, 100th Monkey Project, Ad Noctum, Patricia Giaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, Alfred Tuttle, American Rambler, Andy McNamara, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Cash, Charles Davis, Chris Ernst, Craig Cisternos, Greg Parmenter, David Moore, Denise Sarek, Diane B., Dominic O'Malley, Edu Camahort, MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullitt, James Lattimore, Joanna Rojas, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Christian L., Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Stefan Javonisky, Jim and Sophie, Mark H. Brady, Matt in Delaware, Matthew Sproul, Maddie, Nagatha Christie, Patricia W., Ray Benedeno, Riker Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sharon, Sedgder, Stone Wilderness, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, 36 Dingo, Vincent Trewell, Walker, William Powell, William Lovelace, and Ren Collier. Thank you all so very, very much. There will be a Patreon extra segment from this show where we talk about Twin Peaks and other weird esoteric type of things like that. A lot of movie talk and a lot of extra weirdness thrown in. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.